I'm the Greek Geek because I'm 50% Greek and 100% a geek. And now, the sequel to the very well-regarded It movie has been released. And now the real question is, does it float? How can I put the plot of this movie simply? 27 years ago, a group of kids beat up a clown, and then now in this movie, they reunite to beat up the clown again.
Something happens to you when you leave this town. The farther away, the hazier it all gets. But me, I never left.
We have a phenomenal cast for this movie with the likes of James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, and Isaiah Mustafa.
If it isn't dead, if it ever comes back, we'll come back to it.
The cast was really well chosen to portray the Losers Club when they are adults. Everyone really captures how they were as kids, as adults, if that makes sense, very well. James McAvoy does a good job as well, as he always does. And I like how his character, when they get back to Derry, he starts to pick up the stutter. At the start of the movie, he seemed to have gotten over it, but then when he's back in that position again, and he's just like reverting back to his old ways and can't handle it now, so he reverts back to his stutter. But Bill Hader, he did a really good job in this movie. He was a really big standout for me because I haven't really seen him in any serious roles. Well, none I can think of at the moment, but he was really good, even though he plays as a comic relief kind of character, always cracking jokes and that. But that's his character. Anyway, he did a really good job, and he really did a good job in the more serious moments too. And as I said before, all the grown-up versions of the Losers Club look and feel like they should as adults, except for Ben, who is now a sexy stud muffin. And Bill Skarsgård does a good job as Pennywise again. He really knocked it out of the park last movie, and he does it again in Chapter 2. To put it simply, this one is not as scary as the original. Like, the original one, the first movie, wasn't even that scary as the top like horror movies out there, but it still had some very scary and very tense moments. This one, not so much. There's still that feeling of tension, but it builds and builds and builds, but it doesn't really pay off as much. This movie seems to rely a lot more on jump scares as well, and I don't like that. I don't like jump scares. They get me a lot, but if even I'm not scared in a horror movie and I get scared very easily, then it basically fails as a horror movie. There is some grotesque imagery and some weird stuff in this movie, but it's not really that scary. And this movie has so much more humor than what you'd expect in this. Like the last one had its goofiness, sure, but this one, a lot of the tension and the payoff for a lot of scares is undercut by humor. Like, for example, Bill faces off against the leopard thing again that Pennywise takes on, and he like strangles it, and then it vomits all over him, but when it's vomiting all over him, it's played up for laughs and goofiness, and it just takes all the tension out, and you're like, well, that wasn't scary at all.
You lied, and I died. You lied, and I died.
So you would have heard by now that this movie goes for nearly 3 hours long, and that is way too long in my opinion. A lot of people have said, well, you've got movies like Lord of the Rings and Avengers Endgame that go for 3 hours and no one complained. But that was part of a much larger story, and it was a lot more interesting and much more well-paced, in my opinion. This one, a lot of the movie is focused on looking back into the past. This one goes back and forth like it does in the book, as opposed to just focusing in the 1980s like it did in Chapter 1. And there was also a lot of focus on characters looking back to where Pennywise scared them previously and then them facing Pennywise again. And every main character gets that, and it kind of bogs the movie down, in my opinion, and they go for a bit too long. Like, it seems like a solid hour of the movie is dedicated to that. And there's definitely some stuff that can be cut out, like the stuff with Henry Bowers, the bully in the previous one, where he's in the mental institution, and he breaks out and kills people, and he starts attacking the Losers Club. It really doesn't have that much of a bigger impact on the overall story. He just kind of shows up and tries to attack people occasionally, but it doesn't really affect the plot. and I really feel that those parts of the movie could have been cut out. It would not have been faithful to the book, that's true, but to help with pacing, that kind of stuff could have been cut out, in my opinion. But who am I to say that? I'm just some random Australian guy who talks about stuff on YouTube.
Hello.
I haven't read the book in its entirety. I haven't even made it halfway or anything, because I am sucking at getting back into reading books at the moment, even though I've been meaning to for a long time. But I've read that this movie is a very faithful adaptation to the book, so if you're a fan of the book, then you're going to like this part as well. And also what's cool is that Stephen King gets a cameo in this movie, which was really cool to see. But I think I was one of the few people that actually noticed that it was Stephen King. A lot of the people that were in this session that I was watching were mostly like teenagers. There were a few older people and people my age as well, but it was mostly younger people. And I heard no one go like, oh my god, that's Stephen King. I even had to tell my girlfriend that was Stephen King. So would I recommend that you see this movie? Yes, if you're a big fan of the book, you will love this movie. And obviously you would have seen chapter 1. If you love chapter 1, you would enjoy this chapter as well. And even if you like the TV miniseries that came out in 1990, if you like that, you'd probably like this too. If you're a big fan of horror and love scary movies, then this one might not be so much for you, because it's not that scary, to be frank. So that is my review for It Chapter 2. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble on about a movie for a few minutes. I really do appreciate it. Thank you again, and I'll catch you next time. And don't forget to subscribe.